Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to dive deep into the case of Do Kwon, the guy who only 3 months ago was heralded as this crypto hero from South Korea, a Stanford alum, and this young guy who's going to revolutionize digital finance, but then in the course of a few weeks lost about $45 billion of investor money and then became like a super pariah. He's kind of gone into not hiding, but was on the, down low for a while. And we just had an exclusive interview drop that he gave to an obscure coin-based outlet that wanted to tell his side of the story. And so is he the Korean version of Elizabeth Holmes, or is he just some guy who just got caught up in the whole crypto bubble? And for our K-beauty segment, it's fresh again. Oops, yes. If you had to choose just between the Youth Lotus Preserve or the deep hydration face cream in the Rose Hydration line, which one would I go for? Which one would be right for you? All that coming up. Stay tuned. So this was a bit difficult for me to try to get into because I really was rooting for this guy. Do Kwon, yes, he's a Stanford alum, so, I met him once at, I think, a Stanford event or a tech event, and he seemed like a great guy, and it sounded like he was going through a lot of media scrutiny, and, I thought that he was being unfairly treated, and that, he was going to revolutionize decentralized finance, or basically cryptos, and really kind of put South Korea on the map and, a young Korean founder on the map. And I think his case is a bit complicated. So you have people who are really right now, even in the South Korean government, like prosecutors, wanting to tear this guy down, wanting to basically try to prove whether he was running like a Ponzi scheme, whether he was creating a fraudulent coin that he knew wouldn't work and would defraud investors. Or you have this on the other side of the extreme spectrum, it's totally just a technology product, a startup that did not do well, and it just failed like a lot of new ideas and products do. I think perhaps the truth is somewhere kind of in the middle. Now, he says he's actually no Elizabeth Holmes, that's not a correct comparison, and I somewhat agree with him on that. What Elizabeth Holmes did was on a different level, and it involved people's health decisions. She knew that the product did not work, yet she sold it, kept marketing it as something that did work, and in the actual delivery of the results, she wouldn't use the machine that was her invention, but pretended to use her machine and actually diluted the blood sample and ran it on a standard machine that other hospitals use, but because it had been watered down, the test results are even less accurate. And so people were changing and getting prescriptions that they didn't need, or stopping prescriptions, or changing the level of their prescriptions, or getting diagnosed with things that wasn't part of their health record. And so it was a complete fraud in that case because it never worked to begin with. Now, what is Do Kwon's product? It was Terra Luna. And why are there two names? Because it's sort of like you're getting two coins in one, but not really. And so for the layman out there, and you can look up all the complex explanations of how his crypto coin worked, but the major selling point for his crypto was that it was going to be a stable coin. You know how crypto price is going up and down like this, and people just like, give me something stable, something that doesn't change in price. So for the way that it mainly worked for about a year was that if you bought one, it was always $1. 1 Terra, they called it a US Terra, UST, is always 1 USD. I mean, when you go into crypto, right, you want the price. I think you would want the price swings, like willing to take the risk to get up the high. But some people just wanted it to be like, okay, I believe in trying to get out of the traditional money system because, people are concerned about like inflation and stuff, and they were just like, oh, I don't really like fiat currencies. That's a whole nother topic. And so it's supposed to always be $1. But again, why would you want to put your money in something that doesn't change in value? I mean, as much as you might be a fan of like digital currencies and where that industry is going, why would you want to put your money there if it's only going to always be $1? And so they had actually created this system on top of their platform where you get 20% interest. Yeah, a year, right? Like, we've never seen that. That was like maybe back in the 1970s when like, there was like that oil shock inflation, all that out of control. Maybe only then you were seeing like bank accounts, just your regular savings account being like in the teens of percentage points. And so that was the lure where people started to pour their money in because you could get guaranteed 20%. Now, after a while, it became like, how is this too good to be true? Is this possible? We'll get to that in a little bit. But that was the main initial draw, like the whole product market fit. Why did people want this? So they wanted a stable coin. So like, and if you're also trading cryptos here and there, it does help to have something that is sort of like a US dollar that's also a coin. So people wanted to have 1 UST be 1 USD. But how do they make that work? In the normal world, what you would do is say like, I got a sack of cash, tons of dollars here, and whenever you want to exchange it, hey, here's $1. But that's not what they did. Because number one, you're going to need all those dollars, which, wouldn't it be great if you can make a money without having money to back it up? Well, this is essentially what they kind of did. So instead of like saying like, okay, this 1 US Terra is $1 that I have, or gold or something like this that I'll exchange it to, they're gonna be like, we don't want to depend on US dollars because that defeats the purpose anyway. We just want it to have like a mental calculation of it being $1, but we don't want to even use dollars. Okay, now this is where the Luna part comes in. Luna was another coin that they said was, instead of the dollars or the gold, saying like, hey, look, it's gonna be worth like a bunch of Luna. And so, but you're like, well, why would I think Luna is worth anything? So at this point, there were a lot of people buying tons of crypto. So there were Luna customers in general. So Luna was worth money. And so they would make this link. The link was called the algorithm. And that's why it's called an algorithmic stablecoin, so that it was able to maintain its $1 status by always trading the fluctuation of Luna. If I kind of lost you there, essentially what would happen is that if the price got like, if the equalization didn't match up, they would either burn some, and burning means destroying some of the Luna coins so that the value goes up, or if they needed the value to go back down a bit, they would print more Luna. And so Luna is sort of like, let's say like it's not like a pot of dollars. Let's say they're like baseball cards. You know, they have some value and people are buying baseball cards. And so they're saying like, well, it'll always be some sort of magical formula that like maintains like what you can trade UST for Luna, and that equivalent will be like $1. And so therefore there's like the reason why it's always $1. And then so they would either burn up some baseball cards, and then the baseball cards that are still in existence, they go up in value because they've been burned up. Or if they needed to have more baseball cards, they would just print out some more baseball cards and sell those. And then you could always exchange your 1 UST for a bit of Luna that would equal $1. And that's how they kept it supposedly stable. Now, this is the problem I sort of have with this, is because if in just, normal fluctuations, small fluctuations, there's always some baseball cards you can burn, always some baseball cards you can print. It's not a big deal. But what happens suddenly if nobody wants any of the baseball cards anymore? Value goes down and there's no way to make that up. Or what if so many people just say like, okay, I'm done with the UST, give me the Luna, and then I'm going to take the Luna and then, transfer it, and then I'll suddenly have dollars in my account. Well, what happened was essentially, they say, coinciding with the way that the market melted down in May, was that there was a shock to the system that started to destabilize, and they didn't have enough baseball cards or Luna to be able to make the transaction, and it started to fall apart. Now let's rewind a little bit. So when did this get started? It was only like March of 2021, and then within a year he was like the number 8 cryptocurrency there in value. So it was like, I think valued at about like $100 billion, but when all was said and done, people lost about $45 billion, $80 billion in total, because once one cryptocurrency fails, it sets off a chain reaction. And so it was kind of like part of the whole crypto winter where it kind of crashed. And so what happened was that in May of this year, early May 6th or May 7th, there was a few transactions that were huge, $84 million, and then it was followed up by hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe about $200 to $300 million in total, where people who had UST suddenly sold it. And Do, in his interview, says that most likely there's something fishy going on, and fishy going on even from his team. He said that either his team or his mother company that invested into him, there might have been a mole that set this up to create a situation where there would be a crisis, where there would be a lot of money exiting the system. Now, in my world, I think like $200 or $300 million exiting your system at once should not tank the entire thing. So it's sort of like the Titanic said it was unsinkable, but it was just one little iceberg. If it was totally, truly unsinkable, then it should have been able to survive an iceberg. But then those watertight compartments apparently weren't so watertight because the water just flowed up over each wall. So how is that a watertight compartment? And so I kind of think we got like a situation with the Terra Luna product was, if there was like a slight thing here, there, slight thing, it can handle it. But when it's a shock, then the system would fail. And this coin was not like one of these other coins where people are saying like, yeah, it's just a crazy old coin, you know, it's a wild, wild west. This coin was supposed to be the one that was supposed to be watertight or unsinkable, or when everything went, you know, haywire, it would always maintain the USD $1 equivalent. And so that's where I have a bit of a problem here, and where I start to backtrack a little bit off of like, you can't compare him to Elizabeth Holmes, to maybe you can compare him a little bit, because his defense was, well, for years this was working, and so it worked until it failed. But in my mind, it didn't have the first usage case of it working or not, like the blood test. It doesn't happen until you have a crisis that really tests whether it is stable or not. If it's just a coin, then it was working. But as a stable coin, you really have to test it in the sense of like, is it going to be stable? And so if you have a building that's supposed to be safe until like a 7.0 earthquake and then like a 5.0 hit it, then that is not what was advertised. And so this coin was not supposed to have this type of instability. Now, on the other hand, there's a new product. This kid wasn't even 30 years old, and there were a lot of known risks for going into crypto. However, if you looked at the marketing and all this kind of stuff, it's supposed to be stable. Now, let's go into some arguments about like where he might have been a little bit shady. And this comes from Korean media interviews that I haven't seen talked about in other parts of these, you know, videos on Terra Luna. And so one of his former partners or engineers at the place that he was working had an extensive interview with, you know, one of these top interviewers, I think, in Korea. She's so awesome. Like she works for like the Christian radio station, but her whole show is about news, and they don't do any like, you know, prayer songs or anything like that. But she is really good at like getting interviews and digging to the truth. And so she interviewed this one guy named Kang Hyung-suk. He met Do in San Francisco, and then they started to work at Terraform Labs. So Terraform Labs, you can kind of think of as like the parent company that set up like the Terra platform, and then Terra, the coin, was a project underneath there. But before they got to the Terra coin, they had this thing called Basis Cash. And so this guy, we'll call him Mr. K because it's Mr. Kang Hyung-suk. So Mr. K worked on Basis Cash, and, you know, everything was going, but then he was just like, okay, like, you know, he spoke up. This was a problem where he spoke up and he had to leave. So why did he speak up? He said like, okay, how is this thing gonna make any money? We know like there's a lot of money flowing through this, but like, you know, banks charge interest or brokerage houses charge a commission fee. And like, where do we get a cut out of any of this money? And especially, you know, if we end up paying interest or something like on people's deposits, like where's this money gonna come from? And he says it wasn't inside the formula. You know, like when you're doing these like crypto digital currencies, you're always like programming stuff. And it's just like, there's no way for us to make money. It didn't make sense. The collateral didn't make sense. So they were working on this in the year 2020. And then by fall of 2020, he left. He's just like, I don't know. This is crazy. It's not going to work out. I don't want to be part of this. So he left. And then he said like, in a few months, I mean, well, we all saw in a few months, March of 2021. So he left in November 2020. So like 4 months later, boom, we have the birth suddenly of Terra Luna coin, or the Terra stable coin. And he said like, oh, it's like it was basically like he just took like Basis Cash and just like, dusted it off and then made his own coin, and it took off Again, because of the reasons that I mentioned before, it offered in this crazy crypto market, oh, this one is going to be very stable, $1, $1. And oh my gosh, if I buy this and then I can get 20% return, hey, so it brought in so much money, and because it was associated with the Luna coin, people were just like, okay, well, like this Terra thing's working well and this is linked to Luna, and so people started buying Luna as well. And so he says that was not gonna work, and people have been telling him that it wouldn't work. People telling Do that it wouldn't work. And so he said that, like, okay, if prosecutors, because, this interviewer, she got in, she's like, well, if the prosecutors were to look, where should they look? And he said, okay, well, first of all, the formula or the algorithm that was actually used in practice may not have been the algorithm that they had kind of presented as a case of this is how the algorithm works. You better check the algorithm. Then he also said, you gotta check if there was price manipulation of Luna. And so, like, once you get into this technological, like, crypto stuff, it gets hard to follow. But they had written into some kind of code where, because you know how it's linked to Luna? How do you set the price of Luna? Well, I would think it's just the market price, but apparently it's a little bit more complex than that, or they had added some sort of like a computer program that would help set the price. And he said that is a little bit, that had areas where it could be very shady, where if you controlled the program, you can just kind of go in at different times and just change the price of the Luna coin. And so depending on all of these complex trades and stuff that happen in a flash and are like untraceable, like if you had the power to just suddenly change the price of stocks and then buy them and then, set the price back and then sell it at a higher price, like that could be really shady. So he's saying that there could be something shady with the system there. And then also, this is one accusation that I don't think has been fully resolved, or people haven't been convinced with Do's response. There was about $3.5 billion that they had set aside as like an emergency fund. And they said that they had bought Bitcoin. So just in case Luna, our baseball cards just kind of like went haywire, they had a backup mechanism of Bitcoin. So again, in one ways it kind of it maintains that philosophy of like, we're staying in just the crypto world ecosystem and we're going to balance it out, not with any traditional money printed by governments, but crypto. And so they did say that they were able to verify that Do like traded about $3.5 billion. And then Do said that like to stabilize the prices of UST and also Luna, they pumped money into the system using that $3.5 billion reserve. But people are like, did you really use all the $3.5 billion? Or, where did some of it go? Basically, they're accusing Do of like stealing it. And so Do said like, well, you can see the ledgers and the transactions and that the equivalent amount was given back in Bitcoin. So, but people are still not like convinced because equivalent amount versus, it was a lot of fluctuations during that time. No. And so during this interview, though, he said that he was very sorry about how it all turned out and that he took responsibility for failing. And he did say that, like, he does think that this was an attack on him because when this attack occurred in early May of just this year, I can't even believe it was just this year, he said that like his entire team was flying to Singapore, and so his entire like executive team and him, because the actual company that the Terraform Labs is a Singaporean company and is based in Singapore. His project is Korean, but I guess it was technically registered not in Korea, because that's how he said that he's trying to, get out of any sort of things that the initial attempts of people attacking him from the government. And so he said that while they were flying, this started happening. I don't know if that's a misdirect or if that, that is true, but I also did read somewhere else that it seemed like there was a concerted effort from some like hedge funds or banks that really baited him into this situation, especially with the purchase of Bitcoin, because that may have come from liquidity of their other coins. You know how complicated this gets. But I wouldn't rule it out if he was attacked, because there was a lot of people who did not want him to succeed. And that's kind of where I feel like this is like it rubs me the wrong way. However, at the same time, especially when you're playing in this world of $100 billion, like billions of dollars, in a financial system that you're marketing as something that you can trust more than other cryptocurrencies and even trust more than money, then you should be able to make sure that you are able to not only survive but thrive despite any bad actors using these nefarious methods. Consider them like your stress test of your system. And if that just fell apart over $200 million, then who's to say this wouldn't happen again? Because 200 market movers, and they call them whales in the crypto and also investment world, who manipulate the markets, they have access to hundreds of millions of dollars just like that. And so if this whole system fell apart because of that, then I think it was better to know earlier on. However, there were so many people that were devastated by this case, and many people who even took drastic actions on their own lives because of the losses that they incurred because of this platform. So Do is in Singapore right now, and he's been there for a while, and I guess he was just there even before the entire meltdown happened. Essentially, the coin became worthless, and people here in Korea have filed class action lawsuits. I think there's investors around the world, and he's just in a lot of trouble. But he says that he's never been in contact with Korean prosecutors. They've never contacted him or charged him with anything. However, one of his business associates here in Korea had his house raided. You know how Donald Trump got Mar-a-Lago raided. It's the same thing. He got the house raided to look for evidence, and apparently some other of his teammates were put on a no-fly list. They're also trying to look into whether they can restrict Do's passport here in Korea. So he's just basically hiding out in Singapore. He said he initially went because there was somebody who broke into his house in Korea and threatened the lives of his wife and child. And so he wanted to go to Singapore for safety reasons. And so that was a little bit shady. Some other things that the interview brought up about whether it's a little bit shady was part of the viability, why you would actually trust a coin, is that whether you can use this crypto in the real world. And he was touting for a long time that they had created a payment platform, sort of a Samsung Pay or Apple Pay, or even sort of like a PayPal that used the Terra coins, and so people would just be using it for daily transactions. And that, in a lot of retail investors' minds, made it seem like, okay, this is something that we can trust. However, apparently for several months, maybe 4 months, they had stopped that project, but Do was still using that as part of his marketing for the coin. And To was saying, like, in his defense, he's like, oh, I wasn't aware because we were working on separate projects, and basically the whole thing, like, they had so much stuff going on. But people were just like, well, I don't know, this, the other guy who was like, running that part of the business was just like officiated your like wedding even, and like, he's like, you guys are really close. But who knows? But there are some red flags definitely there. So anyhow, so if you've been wondering, like, what is this, big crypto drama, and his name probably popped up again now because he gave this exclusive interview, and everyone's saying, like, this is a shady exclusive interview. I mean, I thought the guy did a really decent job, but you can kind of tell, like, yeah, he kind of gave the demeanor of being tough, but people were saying that he did leave out, like, critical questions of, like, did you actually withdraw billions before everything went down? Like, people have been warning you, like, this wouldn't work. Why did you just ignore that? And the outlet is just like is a startup outlet run by this guy named Zach Guzman, and apparently he is also funded by the mother company that created Terra. So they're kind of in the same family, but I mean, media conglomerates also, do similar things. So, but that's the thing. It's really hard, and as people who are outside of this and are new to this whole technology and don't understand, like, when you see lines of code, I mean, how are you supposed to parse that out? Like, sometimes we even have problems like parsing out the ingredients of our skincare products. So it's like, even like, it's like 100,000 times more complex and like undecipherable if you haven't studied computer science. So what I think in conclusion of all of this really shows is that in crypto, and I think it's going to be around, it's going to come back, it's going to, do its things, but there is a creator risk. So like the whole thing about it is supposed to be reducing risk, but you have to trust the person that actually has designed it. So the design proof is huge. And that's why Bitcoin is the market leader, is that it's almost been designed perfectly where stuff doesn't happen, where it falls apart through this kind of stressor. Of course, like, the market can value it in different ways, but in terms of it being a stable formula, so it's the quality of the formula and the code that we really have to assess. But most normal people can't just go in there, even if they had access to look at all the code, to see, like, oh, is this good? Is this bad? Is this trustworthy? But there were a lot of questions and doubts about Terra's platform and algorithm even before all this happened by people who were critical of it. And I'm sorry to say too, I thought like they were being like, overly critical, just trying to bring him down. And maybe there was some of that, but at the same time, they did have a point, and they were sounding the alarms before all of this happened. So there you go. What do you think? I mean, did any of you guys invest in it or know anybody who did? And, what was the consequence of it all? And would you invest again in crypto projects if given the opportunity? Okay, so yes, we are back to fresh because I love it. And then I just like found these in the drawer because I was just like holding on to these bottles to try to eventually do a review of it. And sad to say, I don't think there's anything left in the Youth Lotus Preserve, but this essentially, there's nothing in here. I can't even spread it on to show you. This is my absolute go-to day cream. This is marketed as more of like probably for people in their 20s and 30s, but I think it works for everybody. It's more of a light moisturizer, and it's supposed to address the first signs of aging, boost radiance, strengthen the skin's barriers, and protect from free radicals. And I think it did all of that. And the the Lotus part, or the formula, this soup thing, because you know, like how creme de la mer has some sort of secret sauce. Well, this apparently has some secret sauce based on Lotus. And I think it really did work. It had a lot of hyaluronic acid, vitamin E. What does the Lotus plant do? Captures the multi-benefit properties of the entire lotus plant to address the first signs of aging by hydrating skin, boosting radiance, and delivering antioxidant protection. And apparently now there's a star fruit leaf extract that reduces the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. I would go for this rather, and these are the more reasonably priced moisturizers, around $50, as opposed to like $100 and above for the other lines, like the black tea and the creme ancienne. Gets really ridiculously expensive. So if you wanted to try a moisturizer in the whole fresh kind of family but not spend a lot of money at first, then I would go for one of these two. Remember, I had the cousin of this Rose Hydration, the toner or the serum that you shake and it has the oil thing, and I was just like, it's okay. Well, kind of thinking about the same thing with this cream. This actually does have dimethicone, but low on the list. This also has dimethicone kind of towards the top, but then or towards the middle, but the third ingredient or so is something called C1519 alkane, and I looked that up. I was like, what is that? And it's supposed to be like a natural version of dimethicone, and you know how I feel about dimethicone in an expensive skincare bottle. It should not be in here, especially at the top, because it creates this barrier, and this barrier doesn't let all the good, nutrients go in, because with these creams, you really want it's almost as if it's like a multivitamin. You get it in there, but then this is just gonna block it, and this felt way too dimethicone for me. And so I always say, buy your dimethicone in your makeup primer after you've put all of the nutritional benefits onto your skin. Then you want to give the top coat. You don't want to mix in like your top coat with your vitamins. But of course it feels good. It has like a very smooth, like sealing in texture. So say like maybe if you're like in a snowy environment and you really just want like kind of a barrier also to start when you're in the moisturizer stage of your skincare routine, then this might be good as well. But both very good. This one, some of you have been asking me like, okay, Sean, then what are the ones that you absolutely love? This one, yes, I have to buy it again, but I have so many, like I'm showing you so many ones that I'm like experimenting with. I have to use those up first, but it's always a good test. Does it knock off like my go-to on my shopping list? And so this has not been knocked off. This first chance I get, again, I will buy this one. All right, guys, what do you think? That's kind of crazy. I don't know if we're gonna see any more interviews from Do, but it would be really nice if we could, or have some more investigation into this, because we do have to create a safe investable environment if we're going to move forward in this cryptocurrency world, because as we've seen from this last crypto winter, things can just go south really, really fast. All right, guys, well, make sure you comment and remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.